Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us one of my absolute favorite people, returning guest, Buck Sexton, host of the Buck Sexton Show. And you also co-host a show with Clay Travis, which does huge numbers, which is a lot of fun. You, conservative commentator, so on and so forth. One of the things that your show took over, like Rush Limbaugh slots.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, so the way this worked, just to be clear, because this always gets, people get very testy about it. And they're like, wait a second. So there are multiple companies. Rush was so big that there were multiple companies, radio companies that carried his show. So the one that owned the Rush show, the rights to the show, was Premier Radio Networks, which I work for, which was the majority of the Rush stations. But there's a big chunk of them that Cumulus Media also owns. And so they, for example, carry my friend Dan Bongino, who's a great guy, great host.
Who's Italian, by the way. I had to make this point on Rogan. He's not African-American. He's Italian.
I mean, it's Bongino.
But look at him. You would think you would never guess he's Italian from how he looks.
I mean, also ex-NYPD like I am, although he was real. He actually was a cop. I was like a civilian analyst deployed by the CIA to the NYPD for a year. It's a long story. So not like a real cop, but anyway. But and then there's Dana Lash over at one of the other Odyssey, which used to be called something else. Anyway, this is kind of boring for folks to know, but that's why there's one official premiere replacement on iHeartMedia, and that's the Clay and Buck show. But there are other shows too that are on 12 to 3. And so people always ask me, and they're like, wait a second, who's taking over for Rush? And then I have to say, nobody, because Rush was on 600 some odd stations and was signing, $100+ million deals. So no one's taking over for Rush.
But okay, but that was a very long and
tedious. I know that was a tedious answer. I'm sorry, your audience is already clicking off. You can edit this out if you want.
Oh, no. We do everything possible to make our guests seem boring because it makes me look pithy by comparison.
That's good.
But what I wanted to ask is, this is kind of a softball question, but I still want to hear your thoughts. How did that feel like sliding into his slot and walking in his shoes? That's kind of a major deal for you, especially as someone as a young person.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, it is on over 400 stations, radio stations. So it's even at a scaled down version of the show, right, in terms of number of stations. It's still, I think, quite honestly, now I'm going to do the little, I think it's the most widely listened to talk radio show in America right now by Nielsen ratings. Hannity show is obviously huge. Then maybe that one is number one and we might be number two, but it's something along those lines. So yeah, I mean, it's cool. I had filled in for Rush for years.
Right.
And that was always more like, by the time it came to me actually to be on the show, first of all, it's a co-hosted show. And it's funny because I'll be honest, I never thought, I was never somebody that sought out co-hosting. I've now done it a few times. People always forget. They're like, oh, do you know about the Crystal and Sagar show? And I'm like, I launched that show.
Yeah.
I was a co-host with Crystal. It was a very different show when I was on it. And Sagar is a friend. He's done a great job with it. Crystal's a friend too. We don't agree on a lot of politics, but she's a cool lady. But so I did co-hosting there, and then back in the Blaze. Anyway, so I co-hosted with Clay Travis, who's obviously a big sports guy. Fox acquired his website for a whole lot of money, and that's all public. And we're having a lot of fun. So it's easier to co-host a show, obviously, than it is in terms of content and energy, than to solo host it. So no, man, I was excited. I was like, okay, cool. Because I was doing a 6 to 9 radio show, which you would come on sometimes. Yeah. And that had I had a nice size audience, and we were on about 200 stations, I think, all in. But this one is like I'll call it 4:30, something like that. So, and also a much better day part in terms of listeners. Noon is better than 6 p.m. and a lot of delayed clearances. So it was kind of big, but because there were multiple hosts, so my little tedious answer before, it also was kind of like, it's a different world, okay, right? I mean, it's like, the former Yugoslavia of radio, like there's different pieces of it now.
You recently met President Trump. I saw a picture on Instagram. What was that like? And what were the circumstances there? Were you nervous?
So I go way back with the Trumpster. Before all these other people.
You call him the Trumpster.
I like to call him the Trumpster. I go way back with him, at least with the family to some degree. I grew up in New York City, and I knew a little bit, like not super well. And I always have to say this because, if you don't qualify these things, right? It's like if people are like, oh, are you in the CIA? I say, yes. So like, but you were an analyst, idiot. I'm like, Yeah, I know. I'm just, so I always have to like get ahead of all these things. But I knew the Trump family a little bit. Ivanka, I think this appears on the internet somewhere. The LA Times definitely reached out and asked me about it. They had the photos. She was my junior prom date. So I knew
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah, that's real.
Wait,
that's
whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
You give me half an hour about the fracturing of Rush Limbaugh's radio audience, and now you're going to yada this. Okay, here we got the next 45 minutes. What were the circumstances behind her being your prom date?
Oh man. So
were you like an awkward, gangly teenager with like a giant head?
I had a giant, I've always had a giant head. And I always, whenever I come on your show, by the way, or whenever you come on my show and you make fun of my giant head, there's always people in the audience who are like, I do not like when Malice makes fun of your, and I'm like, it's cool. I have a very large cranium. But anyway, but you're allowed to, that's the thing. You're allowed.
It's like Easter Island.
Special Malice privileges.
Well, you should have told me that you have a head too big for hats. What do you think I'm going to do with this information?
Oh, man. People ask me, like, why'd you pick the sports you did? Because I grew up, I played basketball, soccer, and tennis. And it was just because, like, I tried ice hockey a little bit and I got headaches because all the helmets were too small for me. I tried football and lacrosse and the helmets hurt my head too much. So like, this is
real. Who Artie Lang is? The comedian Artie Lang?
I know of him.
He was on Howard Stern for many years. Then, he's been in and out of rehab, whatever. And one of his books is called Too Fat to Fish. And the title just comes from a reference that he's an adult. And there's a story, and he's going out with his friends to go fishing, and his mom just starts shrieking at him hysterically in the kitchen, "You're too fat to fish! You're too fat to fish!" Which, if anything, if the thing capsizes, you're not sinking. So yeah.
And also, I don't think there is such a thing as too fat to fish, right? You don't really need to. I got to say, that's one of those activities. I grew up fishing and camping a bit because my dad's dad was born in South Dakota, and my dad's mom is from rural Virginia. So I've got, for a Manhattan boy, there's some parts of the family that would be surprised. Folks wouldn't, they wouldn't necessarily. I have an uncle who is a locksmith who lives in a cabin in the woods by himself and has a camouflage pickup truck.
Oh, that's amazing. That's real America.
So we got some real.
None of this city boy, like pansy waist, whatever you want to call it. Okay, wait. So again, were you a gangly teen or no?
No, I was pretty cool in high school.
Okay. So how did you even know Ivanka?
There was a co-ed tennis camp that was just the greatest. When you were like a 14, 15-year-old kid, this was the greatest. It was all these, all of your peers. So your female peers and, guys too, the female peers from like Greenwich, Connecticut. It was amazing. It was great. And Ivanka was there. So we knew each other from that. We were never, people were like, oh, did you date? No, it was because it was junior prom. Senior prom is different. That's what the corsage. Junior prom is more like a semi-formal.
Yeah.
But she was a girl that I hung out with and talked to a lot. And, I asked her if she would come, and she did.
Wait, did you were nervous about asking her out?
I knew her pretty well at that point. So it wasn't, and I didn't think of her as, now it's, the celebrity thing for all the Trumps has grown dramatically. Growing up, like the Hilton sisters were running around the schools here in New York too, and people knew of them. And if you're just looking at like famous billionaire families, the Johnsons and the Bronfmans and the Schwartzmans, and there are all these kids running around New York who are super wealthy. And I came from more scrappy and up by the bootstraps.
This is very Great Gatsby, I think.
Yeah. So
not so Great Gatsby, the Buck Sexton story.
Not Great Gatsby. That's probably a good way to put it. So yeah, but I just remember it was the only time I ever had like a date to anything, and everyone, like, people they just came over, girls and guys, and they just want to take photos with her, like at the, you know what I mean? And so
yeah,
and I was, in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, which I think is an underrated movie, by the way. Like, a lot of people like it. I think it's like a pretty great comedy for what it is. You know the movie or no?
I haven't seen it. I know what it is.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, there's all these scenes where Jason Segel, whatever his name is in the movie, is the boyfriend of this famous actress. And there are all these scenes of him. They just cut to where he's standing there while they're taking photos of her on the red carpet, and he's holding her tiny purse, and he's like this big guy.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. Except
okay. So yeah, that's really, was she, but the reason I would think I'd be nervous to ask her out would be, like, I would imagine she's got a million guys throwing themselves at her. She's very attractive, and she's tall, she's statuesque.
pretty girls running around
Okay.
Manhattan at that age. You know what I mean? So it wasn't really, it wasn't really that much of a,
Oh, so
I
she
don't
didn't
know.
take herself that seriously. She didn't have this kind of arm's length, like haughtiness
No,
about her.
we didn't really keep in touch through college and afterwards. I mean, now occasionally because of what I do, she'll text or call and say, I saw this or this was, we will like, I'd say once, every 6 months or so I hear from her since her dad's been president. But I'm not, by no means am I somebody who's like a part of
Sure.
like the
Trump
Trump
world,
world and part of her life. I'm like a peripheral, I'm in like the realm of the 10,000 connections, not in the dozens or the hundreds. So
you ever feel like you're being followed around the internet? Maybe advertisers know a bit too much about you. So our sponsor, IPVanish VPN, is here to help you take back your privacy and help you become anonymous on the internet. What is IPVanish? It's a virtual private network, a VPN for short. It's an important tool that helps you safely browse the internet. You can use a VPN on your computer, tablet, phone, anywhere you stream media. When you use a VPN, all your data is encrypted, what you're reading, what you're searching, what you're watching, whatever it is you're doing. That's important because whatever it is you're doing isn't anyone's business but yours. For listeners to the show, IPVanish is offering 65% off the annual plan. It's only $375 a month. IPVanish is super easy to use. Turn on with one click. It runs in the background to help protect you while you're browsing the web. If you run into a problem, no worries. IPVanish has 24/7 support by email, chat, and phone. All you have to do is go to ipvanish.com/malice. Use promo code malice. That's MALICE to get 65% off. Their annual plan is only $44.99 for the first year with our discount. This is the time to sign up because with our discount and their current promotion, you get a VPN for 65% off the usual offering. IPVanish is the best of best. They've got a 4.7 out of 5 on Trustpilot with more than 6,000 reviews. So remember, it's ipvanish.com/malice to get the deal and start protecting your online anonymity right now. Guys, if you're like me, you stare at screens all day, and some people get bad sleep from it. Some people get headaches from it. Some people get sore eyes with it. And that's where Blue Blocks comes in. Blue Blocks has 3 different types of glasses to solve those very common problems. Here we go. You got the blue light computer glasses with the clear lenses. They're for people with headaches, sore eyes, digital eye strain. You've got the Summer Glow blue light glasses with the yellow lenses. That's for migraine, stress, anxiety, low mood. And then you got the Sleep Plus blue light blocking glasses with amber lenses if you're having issues with poor sleep and fatigue and low energy. Here's when you'd use each one. You'd use the blue light computer glasses during the day when you're working with the screens, the Summer Glow when you're working with screens or under artificial light, and the Sleep Plus glasses 2-3 hours before bed to help you create more sleep hormones to aid with more better sleep. The Blue Blocks glasses come with non-prescription, prescription, and reading options. They've got glasses for every need, and they've got a lot of other amazing products such as low blue light bulbs, red light therapy devices, and 100% blackout sleep masks, all backed by science. They ship worldwide in record time, and they've got easy returns and exchanges. Go to blueblocks.com/welcome and use coupon code welcome to save 50%. That's BLUBLOX.com/welcome and use coupon code welcome to save 15%. And then maybe, just maybe, you'll finally get that rest that you know that you deserve. Let's get back to the show. So what were the circumstances behind you meeting him?
Oh, well, I went to pick her up once.
No, I thought you met him just recently.
Oh, I'm sorry. Because I met Trump when I was like 15, the first time. So I was at the house as a long time ago. I spent more time at Ivana's house, Ivanka's mother. So I knew Don Jr., for example, great dude. Knew Eric a little bit when he was really young. Eric was like first grade. Anyway, fast forward to now. I was at Mar-A-Lago. So the funny part was that Trump invited me to come speak to him in June of 2020. And I thought it was about COVID stuff mostly because I was I'm actually quite, if I may say, quite proud of being very early in the this is complete madness.
Yeah.
All these public health experts are just effing clowns. I mean, this is horrible what they're doing. They're not looking at the science. I thought he wanted to talk about that. He just asked me to come down to the Oval Office. We talked a little bit about, intel community stuff. So CIA and.
Wait, was that your first time going to the White House as a guest?
No. I mean, I had been to the White House a few times before when I was CIA. Actually, I ran there's a morning. The PDB briefing happens every morning. It's an intel briefing, and all the bureaucracy. It used to be CIA ran it, and then DNI office got created after 9/11, Director of National Intelligence, and then the DNI kind of oversees it. But you still would have sometimes, a senior CIA person or other people from other agencies. I think there's 15 or 16 intel agencies now because they've added 1 or 2 since I was there. Anyway, there's a lot of them. But I did a couple of these deep dive briefings for President Bush at the time. So that was my first time ever in the Oval. So it was in a capacity as a CIA analyst.
Wait, were you not freaking out to go to the Oval Office to meet the president at such a young age?
That was nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
That was actually like, I mean, I have photos of it.
Of course, sure, yeah.
Yeah, because there's official White House photographer, and I wasn't like, I wasn't undercover or some super secret, whatever. I was just an analyst. So yeah, that was intense. He also, I could tell, was super skeptical when I sat down, because I also look young. I mean, especially if I shave this beard, everyone would be like, Michael, why are you making fun of the high school kid on your podcast?
No one would ever ask me why I'm making fun of a high school kid, I assure you.
So I remember I did that briefing. I sat down though, and to his credit though, the reason I was there was that Bush. So think about this, right? People think it's weird. I was 27 or 28 when I was in the Oval Office, and it was only on a very narrow area that I had been covering like exclusively for months and months and months. I've been overseas in Iraq dealing with something, came back, and the normal procedure, and I'm sure this is true across the government, is there's a briefer. And so I would sit down and tell this person, well, here's what you need to know. And then they go and talk to the president and present what I told them. Bush during the Iraq War was kind of like, why don't I just have the person who is briefing the brief, like have a senior, there's senior people that are in there to make sure if there's a, higher level question or whatever. They're like, why don't I just ask the person that's actually the expert instead of the kind of make-believe expert?
Or instead of playing telephone, because I'm sure there's follow-up questions that you're only going to be able to give them so much information.
That's right. And so it actually I think I made a fair amount of sense at the time. So I did that a couple of times. No, that was nerve. So by the time I went back, third time I was in the Oval Office was when I was at the Hill with the show Rising, which became, what is the Crystal and Sagar show called now? It has a new name.
I don't know.
I just called it the Crystal and Sagar show.
Wait. Whatever. So, but let me ask you this: was President W. Bush like in person differently than how people perceive him to be through the media? Because for those of you who are too young to remember, he really was portrayed, and not entirely incorrectly, as someone who can't even get a sentence out.
That part was definitely not true.
Okay.
He actually had a pretty, and that, by the way, that 100%, it was always, yeah, I'm Bush. I can't say, I can't think. They always had this sort of stuttering Texan caricature of Bush. He actually, had a pretty high opinion of his judgment and his knowledge and grasp of the issues. I can tell you, certainly on Iraq, on the Iraq War stuff.
So he had done his homework. That came through.
He certainly felt like he had been through. You remember, they really defined his presidency. I mean, a lot of ways, almost more so than 9/11, right? So he was so in on that issue that he had sat through so many briefings. I did. Okay. So I'll tell you the one, obviously the briefing itself and the topic and all that stuff is classified. I mean, what was said is classified still, I'm sure. But he did say one funny anecdote to me walking out of one funny moment. I was walking out of there and he's kind of just like, hey, he's like, get back here for a moment. And I know this is like the Jon Stewart version of what he sounds like, but that's the best I can do. He's like, get back here. He's like, how does some fancy Manhattan boy end up out there in Iraq doing the stuff you're doing? And I just looked at him, and I had in my head, I was so close to saying, sir, I just love freedom.
You should have said, ask your grandfather.
I should have. Listen, I was going to get to that. I said, like, oh, sir, I'm just doing my best. And, I'm so honored to have tried to, do a little part in the military, the real guys doing the real stuff. And I said something, some rah-rah, I love him. Well, I do love America. But anyway, and he's like, well, while a lot of those fancy Manhattan boys are out there opining, you're actually helping. And I'm proud of you. That's what he said as he like sort of pushed me out the door, which I did think was so funny. Because I'm like, aren't you the like scion of a ultra wealthy Connecticut WASP family like that has sort of taken on Texas as a persona? Yeah.
Prescott Bush, his grandfather, was senator from Connecticut and was like a classic Romney Republican. It was called Rockefeller Republicans then, maybe even before Nelson Rockefeller was governor, like really this lefty moderate, like Eisenhower Republican.
So I just think it's so funny because the caricature of Bush so quickly became this, he's so Texan and all this stuff. I'm like, this is a rich kid from Connecticut, everybody, who went to Yale and Harvard Business School and didn't get into either because he's so smart. So,
I met I've told this story before. I met his uncle, Neil, at an event at Yale. I did not go to Yale. I went to an event there. And I was being my Michael Malice self. I was about at 25% because I wanted to be respectful and so on and so forth. And he charmed the pants off me. So like anyone out there who's kind of oblivious to how, W and Jeb got to where they are, maybe these people don't come off one way on television, but in person, they really know how to turn it on and make you like them and think that they like you. It's uncanny.
Oh no, that is, people always talk about the retail politics and the skill set that some of these guys have.
Yeah.
And you would always hear this about Clinton. And you hear this to some others, that this was always the big tagline on them. But yeah, making strangers feel like you like them and care about their problems in a very brief period of time, and replicating that out like a machine basically is a big part of the job for a lot of that, and fundraising and like reading off a speech. I mean, that's kind of the
it was very impressive. I was like, man, this guy got me. So tell me about this time when you were meeting President Trump.
So this most recent time, Mar-A-Lago, because there was the time with the Hill, and I was in there.
Let's talk about the Hill too. I want to hear all these
with
stories.
John Solomon, and we that was during a lot of the Russia collusion stuff. So there's a lot of that talk. This is 2018, so it's kind of right in the middle. Mueller probe was still going on and all that. So it was pretty early on.
But by all accounts, I've also heard is that Trump comes off like 1,000 times better in person, and he comes off much, much brighter one-on-one than certainly the caricature of him, which bears not that much relation to reality.
I mean, you could sit like, and I mean this, you or anybody who's kind of watching, hanging out with us here, if you sat down and hung out with Trump, he's just constant entertainment and a fair amount of insight too. He just says, he's hilarious. He's super engaging. He says, he'll just say stuff. I mean, and I think also a lot of people underestimate how refreshing isn't even really the right word. I mean, it's like refreshing in the way that I'm sure when Andy breaks out of Shawshank and finally gets out of the sewer, pipeline and is in the rain. It feels like that when someone just will say stuff, let it rip. They don't really care because we're all so used to being so repressed all the time. So I think Trump is in person very, very charming, and everyone, even people who hate him will admit that if they've spent real time around him. Even people that have turned on him, if you ask them in a quiet moment, former people that work for him, former administration officials, they'll be like, yeah, the guy he's really engaging, he's really funny, really charming, and he has that gut instinct thing that I think is so lacking in politics in general today. And by the way, I am one of those people who was a big Trump supporter, but also would criticize him on things. And I think that's one of the big misses that we had the last time. There were not only were there not enough people around him who were in a position to criticize him. There weren't people who would even do it, but then beyond that, the base never wanted to hear it. Yeah, that was a mistake. When I would say this is a bad pick for his cabinet, and I'd say this on radio even before I took over the bigger show with Clay, and my inbox would just be flooded with people, he's playing 4D chess and why don't you understand? And he's, it's like, guys, I want what's best for, not really so much even just for Trump, for the country, but I want the administration to be successful in the areas where I think it has the right ideas as possible. But personnel equals policy a lot of the time. And the personnel decisions from the Trump administration, he admits this, by the way. So people still come at me on this, and I'm like, Trump admits he made horrible personnel decisions, tons of them. I mean, whether we talk about Scaramucci and Amoroso, I mean, you go down the list. These are people that are in the White House making real decisions. No
one put a gun to his head and made him hire Bolton or the guy from Exxon as Secretary of State. This was his choice.
Yeah, his choice. And crappy choices. I mean, just made crappy choices about that. And,
and also wait, one more thing, Buck, which I'm sure you'll agree with. If you're going to crap on these people on their way out on Twitter, someone who's worked for you, even if they've been terrible and say like, this guy's an ass and he's a moron, you can't expect them not to get that 7-figure book deal from HarperCollins and write a memoir talking about what a disaster your presidency is. You've given them every incentive.
Yeah. Look, loyalty is a two-way street.
Yeah.
In every marriage, it's true in every employment, So I have never, I have never gone out there and trashed an employer that I have worked for, with the one exception of CNN, because their people started to trash me when I left. and they actually tried to extend my contract. I said no. I had no job, no money, no income. CNN wanted me to stay on payroll, and I was like, no, you people are disgusting.
They're horrible people.
It's
That's
a
what
horrible
people don't
organization,
appreciate.
horrible.
It's not just that like the network, what they produce on TV is bad, and behind the scenes they're one big family. They're really awful people.
They're bad people. No, I mean Jeff Zucker's he's a nasty. He's just a bad person. I mean, we can go down all the different. A lot of the anchors there, as people have started to find out a little bit more, it's just also dishonest. They're dumb. They're vain. And they're just the whole thing over there. It was just a cesspool. I mean, CNN was a gross place. It got much worse while I was there, to be in all honesty. But that is the only place. I mean, Jeff Zucker himself basically called me out to my face when I was in the building one time to go visit a friend. So I was like, all right, well, now it's, if it's going to be like that, it's open season. But other than that, like, I don't think you trash. I think you know a lot about a person by whether they trash romantic partners. I think that's a huge red flag for anybody. And I think you know a lot about a person if, once, I mean, look, I admit it, I had one with CNN, but if somebody has a history of they leave a place where they had work and all they can say is it sucked and they like hate everybody there and they're public about it.
Hey guys, Your Welcome is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of compare rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try. You might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare. So it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates, quote at progressive.com to join the over 27 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. Whether you're a smoker or an ex-smoker who still struggles with cravings, Fume is the perfect tool for you. Quitting smoking is the best thing you could do for your health, and Fume can help you get there. Fume is a natural inhaler designed for a better, safer, and natural way to quit cigarettes. No smoke, no vape, no nicotine replacement. What it replaces is that hand-to-mouth habit of smoking, which is that ritual, which is so hard for so many people to break. Fume is made of 100% Canadian maple. They have these cores infused with plant oils that are studied to curb cravings. They have flavors like peppermint. Conquer has minty notes to stimulate menthol cigarettes. Lemon Berry Bliss for sweet experience. Their flavors are all 100% natural, no chemicals, no flavors, and absolutely no nicotine. Guys, smoking's expensive. At the very least, you're going to be saving yourself a lot of money. Quitting is tough, but Fume can really help. And they've got thousands of 5-star reviews from smokers who tried everything else, and this works. It's time to create positive habits and quit naturally Fume. And I'm glad to be a part of helping to make it easier. You're going to save on cigarettes you aren't buying. You're not going to have to buy breath mints. Your teeth won't be as yellow when you save on your initial purchase of Fume. If you head to breathefume.com/malice, breathefum.com/malice, use promo code malice, you get 10% off your order. That's 10% off your entire order when you head to breathefum.com/malice and use code malice. Let's get back to the show.
I mean, let's
go down this list. NYPD, CIA, CNN. What malevolent agency are you going to work for next?
You did leave out the Blaze.
You don't like the Blaze? They're great.
I was in the Blaze for 6 years. That's where I was really. I was just a little rinky-dink contributor at CNN for a couple of years, paying me almost like very, very little.
Wait, you think the Blaze is malevolent?
No, I'm saying you left out the Blaze, which is benevolent.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You said, I'm saying you can't just throw in the malevolent organizations. I will say the CIA thing. Okay, I got a couple. One thing is I did have a thought that I didn't get to share with you about police during COVID, which I would like to return to because I do occasionally have these moments where it's like, in Seinfeld where he's like, Newman.
Yeah.
I'm like, Malice, because you're right sometimes about things that frustrates me because I'm like, oh crap, I think he's kind of right a little bit about that, and I thought he wasn't. We'll come back to the police thing on that in a second because cops during COVID, I got some thoughts. where was it for? Oh, a CIA thing.
We're talking about Mar-a-Lago. This is like it's like a Russian doll. All my interviews now. It's a conversation within a conversation within a conversation.
I mean, I'd say that CIA for me as a brand has been so tainted and tarnished that I just take I don't feel that when people say you work the CIA, that place sucks, or like whatever. I'm like, I can say there are some really good people there, and of course there are, the same way there are in any organization that has I don't know, thousands and thousands and thousands of employees. You're going to find some good people, but overall, as an entity, I mean, not good. The leadership of that place, the people whose names are known, Brennan and others, D&I Clapper, the 51 people who signed the Russian disinformation thing about the Hunter Biden laptop, that included Mike Hayden, former CIA director, that included some of the top people. These people are either liars for profit or morons, or maybe both.
They're not morons. You can't tell me that the people who are head of intelligence, although I do owe JohnO'Brennan.com, so that maybe they're not that bright, but they're not morons. I mean, moron is a big word.
So then they're liars for profit. Of course, I will say they're less intelligent than people would think they are for the level.
Fair.
And another thing I think is important for everyone to know is that it's very hard to get some of these jobs. That doesn't mean the people who get them are very deserving of the job.
Sure.
Not the same thing.
You can't look at the Hunter laptop information and see those, let's suppose, photographs of him, in embarrassing situations and think that they're photoshopped. That's nonsensical. That's why they're lying. They have to be lying.
Yeah, they're all liars. And that's why by the way, they don't even try to defend it now. They're like, oh, well, I didn't, I said maybe it could be, or they're trying to do some kind of.
Just like they said, oh, we never said Rogan took horse paste. We just said ivermectin is sometimes used for horses.
It's so
that's
funny.
What you said.
I saw a friend in the gym earlier this week. So I'm actually starting to try to go back to the gym because I realized I, over COVID, really turned into a jolly version of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And so I saw a friend in the gym. First of all, N95 mask on in the gym. This is now April of 2022.
In New York, not here.
He made some comment. He asked me something. He's like, oh, have you ever done, he actually asked me, he goes, hey, he's like, you did the Bill Maher show. He's like, why have you never done the Rogan show? And I'm like, I don't know. They never invited me. And he's like, yeah, I like Rogan's show a lot. And I'm like, yeah, actually me too. I think that's one of the few shows that's kind of outside the conservative ecosystem that I actually will make an effort to listen to because I think it's worthwhile. And he's like, yeah, but that time when he took the not even horse dewormer, horse tranquilizers to treat COVID, I'm just like, no.
He took ketamine. He went in a K-hole. And when he woke up, he had no COVID.
It's not horse tranquilizers, I assure you. And it wasn't horse dewormer either. So,
and the thing is, it's not the other reason it's a lie. It's not, as I tweeted this out at the time, it's not exclusively or largely used for horses. It's used for dogs. I just saw an ad literally yesterday for heartworm medicine for dogs. It's ivermectin. So to claim it's predominantly horse paste is also disingenuous, even if that were the only thing he took, which it's not.
Right. And of course, it's been incredibly effective at preventing river blindness, which is, as it sounds, a really serious thing. And there's a reason the guy who invented it discovered it, came up with it, or got the Nobel Peace Prize. And also a lot lot I mean, there's a lot of medicine out there. You remember dogs use Xanax. Yeah, that's right. You give Xanax to your puppy. I mean, not puppies, they're small, but you give Xanax to your dog. I mean, that happens all the time. If you remember that horrible story about the chimpanzee that attacked the woman, it came out that the chimpanzee had an anxiety disorder essentially and was being given human Xanax. So like this is, the same biochemistry for humans and animals often applies.
Yeah. So let's finish the Mar-a-Lago thing.
Okay, sure. So the Hill story wasn't really as good in terms of the interview there. Although Trump, off camera, I wish they said this on. He's like, Russia collusion. It's not even a good bleeping idea. I'm like, exactly. This is what I said all along. It never even made sense. Like, how is this supposed to work? He's going to be in Putin's pocket the whole time after Putin helps him steal the election, as if, the whole thing was so crazy. But then on the Mar-a-Lago thing more recently, that was with Clay. You ever been to Mar-a-Lago, by the way?
No, I'm a pleb.
It was my first. It was my first time, and it's quite a scene. It's very that sort of glittering Palm Beach, old Palm Beach. If you've been to the Breakers Hotel, that's the only thing that kind of feels like it in terms of the grandiosity of it. But anyway, because a lot of Russians at the Breakers when I'm there. Probably not anymore, but just saying. but yeah, we talked to Trump, and look, it was one of these moments where we talked to him for an hour on the radio. Okay, so we had him for a full hour. This was not a short interview, and it all just gets boiled down to really one moment, almost one line in the interview. I asked the first question. I said, "Mr. President, I think Putin had just gone into Ukraine.
Yeah.
The situation in Ukraine is a crisis. What do you think about it?" I mean, a very open-ended question.
Yeah.
You're the former president. What do you think? And he said this thing about, oh, it's, Putin goes in, it's genius. He was kind of saying it sarcastically. And then he went on to say, this never would have happened on my watch because, I would have stopped it, whatever. The entire corporate Democrat, I use your corporate term, by the way.
Am I wrong?
I want to give you credit for this. You told me once, because I admit when someone has a good idea or when someone tells me something and I'm like, that actually makes more sense what I'm saying. I used to say the mainstream media, the MSM, no, the corporate Democrat media or the corporate leftist media or corporate aligned, which I think is a better term.
They're not mainstream.
They're not mainstream.
In fact,
and they don't represent the mainstream.
I'll just give you one example that I'm sure you'll agree with. I threw it over to my Twitter audience, which is not scientific in the slightest. And I said, which would you rather have if you had to pick 9 Supreme Court justices at random? 9 Democratic senators or 9 members of the New York Times editorial board? And I think it was like 80-20 that they prefer the Democratic senators, because even the Democratic senators are going to be more mainstream because there's going to be some modicum of accountability than the editorial board of the New York Times, who are just completely depraved.
Wokesters. And by the way, I don't want to divert from the Trump interview, but I will just say, I think the Elon Musk clip that's been circulated recently, where he says that wokeness, and I'm paraphrasing, but do you know what I'm talking about? He was on the Babylon Bee podcast.
I was in that room, MFer.
You were?
Yes. And at one point he says, well, I don't think anyone, wants to abolish the FDA and the FAA. And it cuts to me. And the guy goes, we have an anarchist in the room right here. Yeah. And I'm just sitting there like, come on. Yeah.
So, but when he says that wokeness is essentially
a mind virus,
a mind virus and a shield for vicious people to attack others and pretend that they're virtuous, that is the most clear-minded definition of people who are woke are really universally, in my experience, nasty, vicious, and unhappy people. Really, to be truly woke, without exception. I mean, the people that'll say there are 37 genders, and if you don't agree, you're a bigot. They're deeply unhappy. They're emotionally unstable. They, if you see on Twitter, often have nose rings and blue hair, but and they're nasty people. And a lot of people, I think, adopt the woke mantra, not really even believing it, but just knowing that it's an effective attack tool, or an effective weapon to go after people. So you don't have to believe that men really should compete in women's sports, but you just want to say, well, I do believe it so that I can say you're a bigot, and that's really what it comes down to.
I think people underestimate the appeal of allowing humans who have been largely powerless their entire lives to feel that little bit of power and strength. It's incredibly enticing, and this is what it gives them.
This is why
it would be the situation would be reversed, by the way. If this were some kind of conservative ascendant country, there would be plenty of people who would adopt conservative mores just to be judgmental. I know lots of friends who are good Christians, and everyone knows someone in their church who, wraps themselves in the Bible, but just feels the need to wag their finger and condemn other people.
Well, last week I was on a flight, and I didn't even know this. I wasn't even trying to be a rebel. All the different airlines, believe it or not, still have not only a mask mandate, of course, which is for morons. I mean, this is truly this is like telling you to put your Kindle on off because it could crash the plane. That was the policy, the FAA policy for a while. I'm like, how many people are forgetting to do that? If that can crash the plane,
right, exactly. Yeah.
like it's never safe to fly. I mean, this whole idea was completely insane, but they made people do it. You remember, you'd sit there with it, and they change it. But I remember having my Kindle. Oh, sir, you have to put that away. It could,
and let me assure you all, when this was the policy, I would call all of my friends who were on a flight, hoping that maybe I could get their shoes when they passed.
What?
Because if they're on the flight and I'm on the ground and their phone starts ringing, it's game over, buddy.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was like, now I get it.
That's sporty chess. That's sporty chess, Buck Sexton. I'm the one with the big head.
You're going next level there, buddy. But so I was on a plane last week, and an airline attendant, and there was a moment where I was like, is her name actually going to be Karen? I think it was Laurel. I don't think it was Karen. I don't remember now.
Maybe it was Yanni.
But This is
Remember
unfair
that
because
sound?
you make
Or
these jokes and sometimes I laugh just because you're funny in general. And then people later on are like, do you realize what he said? And I'm like,
I'll
no, I
be happy to
don't.
explain it to you. There was an audio file that went around the internet a year or two ago, and some people heard the speaker say Yanni, and some people heard the speaker
Oh,
say Laurel.
okay. Thank you. Okay, fair enough.
It was an auditory illusion.
So where was I on this one? Oh, yes. And she told me, so I had a gaiter on, which is like for skiing, I guess, mostly or whatever, because it's more comfortable than one of those dumbass masks. And she's like, sir, you're going to have to put this on too. Not even take it off. She hands me a surgical mask and I'm looking at her. I'm like, okay, so your policy is that I now have to wear 2 masks? Like, is this a punishment? Because you have just a surgical mask on.
Yeah.
So I have to put on a surgical mask and then pull up my gaiter, or can I just wear the surgical mask? I'm not exact. She was deeply confused.
Oh yeah, there's no mind there.
She just, and I sit here and I'm like, COVID has been for me the most disappointing period in my lifetime of seeing humanity on a broad scale, incapable of thinking for themselves, unwilling, I think, in fact, even terrified of thinking for themselves. And also, I think when you add emotion into the equation, the average IQ drops to a point that's pretty terrifying.
Well,
So,
no, you're completely. Okay, there's a lot. Let's talk about this. I don't know if we're going to get to the other stuff, but I disagree with you a lot, specifically in terms of you being disappointed. If you have a parrot as a pet, and if the parrot doesn't play fetch, or if you try to get your cat to repeat words for you and the cat doesn't, are you disappointed?
No.
So if human beings are by their nature, in the vast majorities, largely mindless and incapable of doing these certain things, I don't think
you're making a huge assumption there. I wasn't willing to make that assumption.
I'm not making it, Buck. It wasn't an assumption. It's a conclusion reached by a lifetime of data, and that's a conclusion that you've reached reached apparently by having more data. So I don't know if that disappointment's the right term here. I don't think that's a valid response.
I thought people were more okay. Maybe I could amend this a little bit insofar as saying intelligence. Okay, we'll put that aside. That's maybe too sweeping for people.
And I'm going to say one more sentence, by the way, before we go on. It's easier to train a smart dog than a dumb one. So them being trainable is not a function to their lack of intelligence, but rather in many cases, not that woman you were talking about, Laurel, a testament to their intelligence.
So, Laurel Yanni. Now I remember. Now I actually really get it because it was Laurel Yanni. Now I get the joke. Well done. And her name wasn't Laurel. I can't remember what it was now, but anyway, who cares? Point is, I also thought that people's tolerance for abuse at the hands of very stupid, very corrupt people,
especially Americans,
was much less than it ended up being. And this is why I give full credit to Carol Markowitz, who's kind of one of the other early voices on this issue, who was saying, people are crazy on this, and particularly on the masking. Masking so clearly became a symbol more than actually a medical intervention of any kind. But I thought that people would recognize through the hypocrisy of their leadership, and we sit here and go through every mayor who was all about masks, caught at some party, or you had Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, the mayor of Chicago, the mayor of New York, everybody. The blue checks who all said that the marching in the streets was fine for Black Lives Matter, but for no other purpose or reason could you gather, the funeral that you wanted to go to for your family members, that wasn't important enough. But people whining about police treatment, that was important enough. Anyway, that was a breaking point, I think, for a lot of people that wasn't replicated as broadly as I thought it should be. And so I grew up in New York City. I've lived here most of my life. I blame New Yorkers now, not even the leadership. Like the fact that they're still masking up 3-year-olds in New York City schools, parents should stage walkouts. I mean, with their children, they should be protesting outside the schoolhouse and saying, what the hell is going on here? People are just little automatons. If they're told by an authority figure to do this, they do it. And what I mentioned about the police is, you and I disagree about the abolition of police as something that is realistic for, and I don't think we have really time for that now. And but I did see a side of law enforcement. There should have been widespread nullification of the stupid COVID laws. I'm not asking for anybody to do anything crazy, but just let it go. I mean, we've done this with drugs now at a federal level in states all across the country. I mean, not all states, but a lot of states. We've just said, all right, the feds have backed off. So you're not going to bring, a weed prosecution against somebody. The federal government's not going to come in and arrest you for selling it in Colorado. They could, but they don't. And I saw a lot of these videos of cops arresting people for being in a restaurant without a mask on and all this sort of stuff. And it was gross.
I think the worst one I would probably be, if I had to guess, when you have people leading prayer services.
Yeah, the church in Canada. Yeah,
that is the one for, I think, any conservative or any decent person, frankly. When you see that, someone leading a prayer service, church, synagogue, mosque, whatever, and you walk in and you put your hands on that person leading that peaceful prayer, that to me is when you become an enemy of civilization. I'm not even going to say to condemn all cops. I'm just going to say in that instance, those cops,
right?
Like, how do you sleep at night?
I deal with this all the time too, because when you're on a radio show that has as many listeners as the one that I do with Clay has every day, I'll criticize airline attendants who do that, and then we'll get an airline attendant who calls in and says, "But I haven't." Well, I'm obviously not talking about the cops that didn't drag little old ladies out of the church because they weren't masked up or vaccinated. I'm not talking about them, right? I'm talking about the ones who did it, and there were cops who did it. There were police officers who went along with it, and it was really disappointing to see, man. And I think that the long-term implications of even what happened in Canada with the truckers and the cops going in there and stomping on people, having the horses stomp on protesters and bludgeon them and all this stuff. The state is not your friend the way that people think it is, Mr. Malice.
Guys, we got a different kind of sponsor for this episode, the Jordan Harbinger Show. It's a podcast you should definitely check out since you're a fan of high-quality, fascinating podcasts. The show covers such a wide variety of topics through weekly interviews with heavy-hitting guests. There's a ton of episodes you find interesting. If you're a fan, you can check it out. There's an episode for everyone, no matter what you're into. He's got a lot of cool guests. Like one week, he's talking to a hostage negotiator from the FBI. Another week, he's talking to a cinematographer who discovered Lost City in the Jungle. Something for everyone. The podcast covers a lot, but one constant is his ability to pull useful piece of information from his guests. You'll find something useful you can apply to your own life, whether it's an actionable routine change or just a slight mindset tweak that changes how you see the world. Search for the Jordan Harbinger Show. That's HARB as in boy, IN as in Nancy, GER on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Here's the URL, jordanharbinger.com/subscribe. The podcast on Spotify is jordanharbinger.com/Spotify. And to learn more about Jordan himself, you can just go to jordanharbinger.com/about. Hey guys, one of the things I'm very grateful for is the fact that I'm in my 60s and still have all my hair. And hair loss is an issue for guys everywhere. 2 out of 3 men will experience some form of hair loss by the time they're 35. More than 50 million men in the US suffer from male pattern baldness. And Keeps offers a simple, affordable, and stress-free way to keep your hair via convenient virtual doctor consultations and medications delivered straight to your door every 3 months. You don't have to leave your house, which I know none of you do anyway. I know who listens to the show. 24/7 care and support. They've got a network of expert advisors to support you in making your hair goals a reality. Low cost. Treatment starts just $10 a month, and Keeps offers generic versions of the 2 FDA-approved medications to prevent hair loss. Keeps has everything your hair needs, delivered straight to your door with discreet packaging and proven results. When it comes to your hair, save more, spend less. If you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, go to keeps.com. That's KEEPS.com/welcome to receive your first month of treatment for free. That's KEEPS.com/welcome to get your first month free. KEEPS.com/welcome. Let's get back to the show with a man who's got a great head of hair, Buck Sexton. No, I'm glad you've come. I wish I was wrong, to be honest. This isn't one like when people like you and many other conservatives, I've kind of changed their thinking, the police, and they all expect me to be like, haha, I told you so. I would much rather be completely utopian, delusional, whatever, crazy person, whatever you would want to call me, than to be right on this one. I wish that when COVID happened, you had all these cops being like, you know what, this gym, which is going to be full of people who are really concerned about their health, I'm not going to go in there and arrest those guys. I'm going to have a talk with them, so on and so forth.
The part of it that I didn't anticipate properly, other than the tolerance that people have for the dumbest. I mean, the tolerance that people had for being told. I was told in a restaurant in New York City, blocks from where I live, that their policy, and they were dead serious about it. I mean, they like, the woman who told it to me, it practically had tears in her eyes, but she was like, no, this is like really important. You had to mask up for the walk to the table, which people know. And now that is stupid beyond words just to start with. But they had instituted, because they said they had a recent outbreak, an additional policy of you couldn't drop your mask until at least drinks or, food and drinks arrived at the table. To which I pointed out, but there's a glass on the table with water in it. Does that count? Do you know what she said? No, doesn't count.
But
someone explain that one to me.
If first of all, we know COVID only travels when you're standing, so that's just
right.
science. But also, as I've pointed out at the time, they were more scared of getting COVID than having COVID, because getting COVID meant that they did something wrong.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, it became a moral thing, and you have all these people that it turned into, and I keep having to remind everybody, they're starting to see it now. I've been saying for the last 2 months, when it seems to have died down a bit, I'm like, they're not done, guys. They're not done. I know that we all want to think that they're done, but they're not done. Like the Fauci crew they're not over all the power they've had and everything else. And the Democrats, I think, are kind of in a frenzy to figure out what's the best way to use this thing. What's the best narrative so that COVID isn't a liability going into the midterms for them, but is actually some kind of an asset. And they'll play as rough as they possibly can. They're completely shameless and disgusting. So now I got sidetracked.
But let me ask you this: you don't think that they basically put Fauci in the milk carton?
Oh, he's back.
Where? I mean,
like, he's coming back. They've got him standing in the wings now. He was exiled temporarily because it wasn't a good look, but now he's back and saying that we're going to have to pivot to masking. Look, the UK just had 5 million cases of COVID in, I think, a week. 5 million. So COVID, but then well, how many people are dying, going to the hospital? They're not even really tracking the numbers anymore on a lot of this stuff the way they were. They're certainly not publicizing the numbers the way they were, because to publicize the numbers would be an admission of the scope of the failure, which is what has actually happened here. All the stuff we did with COVID to stop spread failed. Stopping spread is a total zero. And now you can get into how effective are the shots for those at risk at preventing hospitalization and death. Some effect. We should have better numbers than we do. But stopping the spread, total joke. I mean, absolute not. Masking, social distancing, the vaccine mandates to prevent COVID from jumping from person A to person B, a complete and utter failure. And that just goes to show this is in a year's period of time that went from get the shot and you're done to get shot number, what are we on, 4 now?
4,
it's going to be 5.
But I'll defend them, and I'm using the word defend in the loosest possible sense. Maybe I'll explain. Because if you do have this deadly pandemic that's sweeping the globe, and no measures are really going to be efficacious against it, it's a pandemic. It's going to figure out ways to spread. Because we also heard those cases even when it was first starting, when someone's like, I social distance, I never left my house, I wore my mask, and I still got it. There were all these major politicians. If they didn't do something, there would have been a revolution, because people were so scared, not entirely unfairly. So they basically had all the incentives were we have to at least do security theater and give the appearance that we're doing everything.
Well, see, this is what I've said is that if anyone is going to be honest about it, what they find is that masking in particular, masking is quite effective as a political mobilization tool, as a compliance mechanism, and as an anxiety napkin, which is why some people now still choose to have their mask on their face, even when they don't have to, because it's turned into I just feel safer. I was at a, because I'm a big hipster and very cool. I was at a Bushwick rock concert last weekend. That's right. I was wearing a hoodie just like this one. The hipsters didn't. Were
you scared of getting murdered in the street? Because that's, when people wear hoodies, they're murdered in the streets. So I'm told. Yeah, go ahead. So you're in Bushwick, Buck Sexton in Bushwick, New York.
I was in Bushwick, and they didn't even. It's so funny too. The media is so fractured. People are saying, "Oh, are you scared someone's going to know?" First of all, I wish I was that famous, and second of all, no, because even if you're pretty well known on the right, they don't watch, they don't listen, they don't care. They're all sitting there, watching MSNBC or I don't know, whoever the lefty radicals are into these days. But the point is, I was there and there was a guy there and I saw the wheels turning in his head. He had a mask on. Maybe 2,000 people crammed shoulder to shoulder watching Bob Moses, by the way. Good band. Highly recommend. And 2,000 people there. And this guy has a mask on. He pulls his mask down to drink, margarita, whatever he had. And I looked at him, I'm just like, oh my God. I didn't say anything. Because look, I think when people are on their off time and you harass them for no reason, you're a jerk. Like I just think, you don't ruin someone's night or ruin someone's day for no reason ever. Like there's
enjoy the show. Enjoy the show. Yeah,
exactly. Enjoy the show. But another little hipster chick who was dressed like she had raided her grandmother's closet from the 1930s and just like thrown it all together in some big mess. I mean, some of the outfits you see there, interesting.
I'm sorry, but a girl who raided her grandma's closet from the 30s, odds are it's gonna be a badass look. If that's real vintage stuff.
Okay. I mean,
am I wrong?
Like imagine somebody walked into a thrift store and they had 30 seconds to grab the craziest stuff they could. And that was the outfit. Okay. So whatever that would be. Yeah. I agree. Like 1920s people dress really well. Fair point. Whatever. So you're like the real-time ombudsman, that's whatever do your podcast.
I was the last ombudsman on Red Eye, the last episode for the last guest ombudsman. So that was one of the great privileges of my life.
I'm so happy for Greg's success now with the new show, but wasn't Red Eye a great show, man? It really was.
I have a signed cue card from Tom Shalhoub from the last episode for me and all the other guests hanging in my house. It was one of the great achievements of my life to be on that show. And I look back at those clips with great. They let me, the things I could get away with on that show. I was cracking jokes about Robin Williams killing himself. It was dark. I was making jokes about Jeffrey Dahmer serving veal. Like I got away with whatever I wanted.
You and my good buddy Jesse Kelly, who do you guys should definitely.
I love Jesse. Yeah, I asked him to be on the show. He could only do Friday, so you're plan B.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, there we go. And that sounds about right. You guys have different rules. Like Jesse's tweets sometimes are super funny. I mean, they're legitimately hilarious stuff. And I'm just like, if I did that, I would get a call from HR. They'd be like, excuse
no
me,
question.
Like no question, right? Like, cause I'm working corporate side and all this stuff. You and Jesse get away with stuff. Anyway, back to Red Eye. That was the first.
But that's not your personality. You're not this kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not I mean, I like to like joke around a little bit, but I'm not. I'm not making the kind of Kamala jokes that Jesse makes, for example. Like he goes after Kamala. And if he was here, he would make another comment about that I'm sure would be quite amusing. But the first show that I ever did was cable news, period, Red Eye. First show that I ever had on. So, and I was like, I wasn't nervous, but I should have been because I was way less good at it than I wanted to be at the time. But, you learn these things as you go along. One of the important things is kind of knowing, who you are and what your role is all the time, right? So
of course,
coming in there as like a news guy, don't do the scripted jokes thing. Let the comedians do that. You just be like, hey, I'm just like happy to be here with the cool people.
You're there to be the straight guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Just
and
like
they're the punchline. Yep.
That was actually the best advice I got from a very senior CIA guy when I went over to Iraq the first time. He's like, you are an analyst. Know who you are.
Yeah.
Don't grow out a beard, get some tattoo on your arm and be like, yeah, I'm high speed. Like I was hanging, I'm like right there with the Delta guys. It's like you're writing memos and briefing people. Own that. Be really good at that.
I can make a joke about how my grandma got a tattoo on her arm, but you can't make that joke. We're different people.
Fair.
So you're in Bushwick at this party. The guy's pulling down his mask.
And the little hipster girl says to him, so why do you wear a mask if you're just going to pull it down the whole time?
Yeah.
Drinking? And she didn't, I think she was genuinely curious. Like it wasn't meant to be aggressive, but he was like, oh, I wanted to be safe when I came in, but like now I'm here and like the vibe is good. I want to be like, the vibe is good. Like, so
that cures everything.
Like that affects the virus. Like this was amazing. So anyway, that was how, and to his credit, he took the mask off the rest of the time. But with the psychological damage that, Fauci went to my high school, by the way. Like,
oh Jesus, okay.
Yeah, he was the captain of the basketball team at Regis High School.
Wait, he was he's in like 5'1"?
He's like 5'5" or something. He was the captain of the basketball team. Yeah.
Okay, well, what the hell was the Oompa Loompas? What is going on?
I don't. I mean, you'd have to look. First of all, it's like the 1920s. You got to go back quite a way.
Okay, they dressed
Hello, guys. Michael Malice here, underwear model to the stars. If you want to get inside my pants, you want to wear Sheath underwear. And the great thing about Sheath underwear, I just collabed with them to make and design my own pair. and they're inspired by dynamite, just like the cover of the Anarchist Handbook. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice, Malice, you get 20% off. What's great about Sheath, and I wear them every day, is they've got this dual pouch technology, because there's one pouch for one part of your male anatomy, another pouch for another part of your male anatomy. First time you try them on, you're getting all your hands in there. You're like, this is weird. And from then on, you're like, oh, this is the most comfortable underwear I will ever wear. It's got added comfort, added performance, added mobility. And there's something a little subversive about talking to someone while the whole time your underwear is cupping your junk. I'm not going to lie. I do enjoy that aspect of it. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice, you get 20% off your underwear, including my underwear. That's sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice, Malice, for 20% off.
Do you think bananas are healthy? Think again. I'm Dr. Stephen Gundry, best-selling author of the Plant Paradox series, and on the Dr. Gundry podcast, you're going to learn the foods to eat and the ones to avoid to lose weight, boost your energy, and feel your most vibrant, active self this year. You'll also learn simple tips from the world's top experts on health and nutrition. Plus, you'll discover the truth about calories, how running could actually be hurting your health, and why fat won't make you fat. Subscribe now to the Dr. Gundry podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Because I'm Dr. Gundry, and I'm always looking out for you.
Let's get back to the show.
I knew that there were going to be bad things happening all along, because Fauci showed us who he was really early on in the process. And I mean, there are a few things. One is the switch on masks that he pulled, and we're just supposed to pretend like he didn't, and he did, and he lied, and he was a liar, and we all knew it. And he just decided, well, it's the anxiety napkin, right? Like, we need this. I think in the early days, it was mostly that. And then it became more of a political, I'm a good person who takes the virus seriously and all this stuff. I think in the early days, people look, I went out to this grocery store. I'm like ashamed to admit this now. The first couple of weeks, like March of 2020, I was like wearing rubber gloves, because that, I was like, I didn't want to touch anything and get COVID. I didn't know how bad it was going to be. So I wasn't somebody who in the beginning was like, oh, the COVID's on. I was like, no, this is really bad. But he lied about that, and they just let him get away with it, which was completely inexcusable. And then also, that he called Chris Cuomo. There are thousands of seniors dying. I mean, people are drowning in their own lung fluid. Doctors, this isn't talked about very much. A lot of doctors and nurses were also kind of scared to even be really treating COVID patients in the early days in New York. It's one of the reasons. I've talked to doctors about this. They'll admit this. People like to talk about it. They kind of put them on the ventilators really fast, because it was like, put them on the ventilator and see how they do, because they didn't, they wanted to limit interaction, because they were so, look, you could say it's easy in hindsight to say that was overly cautious.
No, I don't blame them.
But that was the attitude. It was like, put them on the ventilator and let's see how they do.
Yeah, if there's some crazy contagious thing that no one knows anything about, and I'm going to play Russian roulette 1,000 times a day, 100 times a day, I'm not going to be doing that even, I mean,
if you go back though to Spanish influenza, which as we know is, very poorly named, but anyway, Spanish influenza actually started, I think, in an American military base, was I think about a 5% fatality rate. They estimate 3 to 5% fatality rate. So, orders of magnitude more than what COVID actually ended up being. If we had a 5% fatality rate disease that was aerosolized and spread with the speed of COVID, you would see the collapse of civilization. And people
well, the other thing with the Spanish flu, I read a book about it before COVID hit. So it's kind
the
of
Pale Rider. That's a good one.
The what?
Pale Rider?
No, I forgot what it's called. But it actually killed like males, like 21 to 30 was the main target, which is so counterintuitive that a disease would take out like the symbols of health in any culture.
Yeah, the prime of life, males in particular, and the speed that disease. I mean, people would come down with it, and within 12 hours, like their face was blue and they were dead. I mean, it was a totally different level of, so anyway, so we had obviously, thank God, much less of an issue than that would have been. But while there are thousands of seniors dying in nursing homes in New York and other, then soon to be other places, Fauci's calling Chris Cuomo, who's a gym bro, no offense, who's a gym bro. Well,
you're about to be a gym bro.
I'm the baby steps of gym bro-ness. I actually got a trainer, which I've never really worked with a trainer before. So I'm in that early stage of, and I'm trying to sort of recognize that there's like going to the gym and then there's working out, which is not the same thing. Like you have to actually be like tired and fatigued and like pushing yourself hard. And if you just kind of show up, like do a little bench, there's like bro workouts. Like I've done those in the past. Anyway.
Are your shins bloody yet?
From deadlifts, I've got the calluses on the hands.
Okay, good. Okay. Then you got a good trainer.
So.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I actually want to do more deadlifts than we've been doing, but because that's a great exercise. But anyway, I'm going to try to turn all that around. Fauci was calling Chris Cuomo at his home every night to check in on him every night for like 10 days. Are you okay, Chris? How are you feeling? The whole thing. You're the head of the NIAID, which is part of NIH, and you're like the most visible person in the COVID pandemic response. You're going to call some spoiled brat CNN anchor every night to make sure he's okay? Really?
How do you know that's why he was calling him?
Because that was the reporting was that he was checking in on him to make sure that his COVID wasn't progressing too much.
Yeah, but I mean, are you being sarcastic right now?
No, what do you mean?
It could have, you're not being, I mean, it could have very easily been him calling him to get the messaging straight.
Oh, I mean, that's not what was reported, but he was just calling to check up on it.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is just because this reported that was the conversation. I was asking if you were privy to maybe other.
That doesn't really make. I mean, why would he have? First of all, why would he have to call him every night? That's a little,
Well, that's a weird. Either way, it's weird. Like text the guy.
Well, it's definitely weird no matter what.
Right.
I just thought it was
right.
So what I'm assuming is that he is privileging some celebrity that he wants to be close to and be on CNN more with when there are a lot of people dying and a really important stuff going on with the pandemic, instead of focusing on his job. What you're saying is maybe there were other nefarious things. No matter what, it was a super weirdo move.
But I'm sure you'd agree there's no possibility that when he has him on the phone that he's not giving him updates and trying to use him as a mouthpiece. That's not that wouldn't necessarily be nefarious either.
I mean, yeah, that if he's telling him true stuff, I guess that's fine. But there was a lot of and we see from the whole CNN debacle with Jeff Zucker, which of course is fantastic because he's a bad guy. Where they were working. I mean, it was so incestuous. They had the former governor Cuomo, comms director, sleeping with Zucker's then side piece girlfriend, talking to Chris Cuomo to make sure that when they have the governor on, the messaging. I mean, the whole thing is just, this is supposed to be a journalistic enterprise. It's a joke. Anyway, I don't like to waste my if someone doesn't recognize CNN as Democrat propaganda at this point, like there's no point. It's kind of like telling somebody at this point, like, hey, you're going to be getting shots forever if you just keep getting these shots. And they're like, no, I'm not. It's like, all right.
But I would disagree a little bit because yes, it's Democrat propaganda, but I think it's also the fact that in many ways, the Democratic Party and large sections of the Republican Party are there to implement CNN's agenda. Because if I was a Democratic governor and I was saying, well, hold on, some of this mandates and social distancing overblown, CNN would have my head tomorrow and I'd be destroyed. Well,
I always do go back and forth on that as to whether let's say the Democrat corporate media is an arm of the DNC or the DNC is an arm of the Democrat corporate media. I think you can make a case. First of all, there's very little separation between them, as we all see now from the way people kind of go from elected office to cable pundit, back and forth. And which one is actually more powerful now, because it's all essentially just a perception battle. I mean, I'm sure you've probably done his podcast. You've probably been to his beach house, hanging out on his surfboards because you hang out with the cool people. Naval Ravikant, Naval?
I know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've not hung out with him.
Oh, I figured you guys might have crossed paths at some point. He referred to news media today as warring propaganda machines.
Yeah.
That is the single most accurate description of the news media that I've ever heard.
It's absolutely correct. And I'm gladdened and optimistic about the future of this country and this planet by how many people, right and left, are becoming aware of this. And another great example of this is what's being done with Tulsi, where the second someone is like, well, let's calm down a second before we start launching nukes, that immediately it's like, oh, Putin told you to do this. It's so brazen, and the warmongering is so over the top that part actually has me concerned, because if there was a case where like military action might be necessary, it's going to be very hard to pull that off, because at this point it's been so bifurcated that right away half the country is going to be like, I don't believe any of this. This is all lies.
Well, it's been fascinating to watch, because I think we're so used to a constant state of, again, the warring propaganda machines, that people will come at you even if you like, I'll say Biden has kept us from, has not intervened militarily with troops in the war, which I think is the right thing.
Yeah.
And I don't want that. And so let's just avoid doing that. And leftists, Bidenists, Democrats, whatever, will be like, why are you Putin's stooge? You're just like, we actually agree.
I'm the American military stooge. I don't want to kill soldiers. That's who I'm the stooge for.
Yeah, but they won't even allow you. They're so used to hating the other side and being trained to hate the other side in all these, political disputes and debates, that they won't allow you to agree with them. They're just not even comfortable with it. They're just like, no. Like, what do you mean? I'm saying Biden's we haven't gone to war there. That's the right move. I want to make sure we stay out of war. And if Biden keeps us out of a war with Russia, that's something that I very much support. And I think we've learned the lesson over 20 years. Look, I even look at some of these guys like Greenwald and Taibbi, and a little bit like, some of the stuff I've said to you, where I said, I think Malice is wrong. That later I think more about it. I'm like, hey, he's actually a little more right than I thought. Those guys were right to question the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
Now, you could say that they were more aggressive about that under Bush than say they were under Obama. Although I'm not even sure that's with those guys. I'm not familiar with all their work. I'm not even sure that would really be a fair criticism of those two. But in general, some of the small L liberals or people who are on the left of the spectrum who still believe in civil rights and free speech, et cetera, at some level, and also just the holding power accountable and speaking truth to power, they were right about a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
they were right about a lot of stuff. So,
Buck, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
That you have only made fun of my head and nothing else, so that I can hold my giant head high as I sign off here, and that any of my audience who watches this won't be. They're always like, "Why do you like him so much? He's so mean to you."
You are a freak show.
Stream the biggest movies and TV shows for free on Pluto TV. Watch movies like Titanic and G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra, plus TV shows like CSI and Star Trek: The Next Generation. Starting this month, check out the 24/7 Stargate channel exclusively on Pluto TV. Plus hundreds of channels and thousands of movies and TV shows absolutely free. Download the free Pluto TV app on your favorite streaming device and start watching today.